Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks so much for joining today's nuts and bolts session of preparing a pitch deck. This program is being brought to you by the MIT Alumni Association. My name is Katya Paramanova, and I'm a 2013 Course 22 alum, MIT 10 committee member, and founder and CEO of Centrally. I'm joining this afternoon from the Bay Area, and I will serve as your co-host for this event. My co-host today is Sean Clark, MIT PhD 2013, who is a volunteer on the Graduate Alumni Council and is joining us from MIT's Building 56. Sean is a communications instructor and focuses on biotech outreach in the Department of Bioengineering. We're super excited to have you all here with us today. And as we get started, please drop in the chat where in the world you're calling in from, your MIT course number and class year, so we can get a feel for who's here. And Allison, we're so excited to have you here. And our speaker today, to give you a little bit of background, is Allison Byers, who is the founder and CEO of Scroobius. It's increasing the diversity in the startup ecosystem by providing the education, tools, and community that founders need to create investor-ready pitch materials, and also serves as a platform to help investors easily find those founders. Allison has an MBA with 15 years of experience building and leading data-driven startups. She's in everything from management consulting to advising Google on marketing and strategy to co-running a medical device company that was spun out of MIT. Allison has packed her presentation with content. So we're going to start banking questions in the Q&A or chat, which you can access below and by hovering along the bottom of your screen in the Zoom toolbar. The presentation will be just under an hour, and Sean will share your questions with Allison to address after each section of the presentation throughout. I know Allison has a lot to share with us, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Allison, I will hand it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right. So I'm so excited to be here and hosting this pitch workshop with MIT for all of you fabulous alumni. I do have a lot of content. I try to pack a lot in here. So I'm going to go through at a fairly quick pace because we do have so many people joining, and we'll stop every so often to answer questions. So as stated, put them in the Q&A. I think you can upvote things. So if someone has already asked your question, just say, yes, I really want this one answered, and there'll be a bigger chance. And then if we have time at the end, we'll come back and get to more questions there as well. So you already got a bit of background on me. I've been in the startup world for almost my whole career, and at that last company, I was the one on the team primarily responsible for fundraising. That was the medical device company spun out of MIT and a hospital system here in Boston, and we did raise almost 10 million. And that was my formative experience as the primary fundraiser. But for me, I was really caught off guard by the challenges that I faced as a woman fundraising. In a way that I hadn't encountered those same challenges previously in my career. So Scroobius is meant to provide education and transparency in how you create investor-ready pitch material so that you're taken seriously when you do go to pitch. And we really focus on having the right content in there and communicating it in a very clear way. So I'm not going to go super in-depth on our platform. If you are interested and you want to learn more, definitely reach out, go to our website, and I am offering a special discount for folks who are joining us today or viewing this later, which you can get at that link there, and we'll share it out afterward as well. And today, what we're really going to go over are basically cliff notes from all the educational material that's in our platform. So what I pulled out for this workshop are kind of the top tips, the things that I want to bring to you that I see most frequently and that I get the most questions about or give founders the most assistance with while they're going through our program. So it's not fully comprehensive of everything, but you're going to get really that top advice, and then it goes much deeper in the program. We do follow this framework. So these are what we've identified as the 10 core sections of a first pitch. And we're going to walk through each of these sections and give you the highlights there. What I really want to stress is that you have to do the work on your pitch. This is not something that you can outsource. It does take time, it does take effort, it can be challenging, but there are services like ours and others that are there to help you and guide you through it and make it less scary. But you have to own what you put in your deck, and you can't present confidently, you can't handle all the Q&A and the diligence that will come your way if things go well, if you really aren't the owner of that material and you don't understand at a fundamental level what's going into your pitch. So please, please don't outsource it. Do it on your own with your team. And today we're also going to focus on the first pitch. So you'll probably hear from people that you should have different versions of your pitch or different things. I like to think about it as having a core pitch and then adjusting what you have in there based on the time allotted to you and your goal for that pitch. So we're focused on your initial 5 minutes. The whole goal of this pitch is to get a meeting, right? It's not to get a check, it's to get a meeting, which is often the goal. That's going to be the goal of most of your pitches. Participants can now see my application. I hope that Sean, pop in if something went awry with the tech. I got a little bit of a weird message on my screen there. So this can be used for multiple reasons, and that's why we have this core base. And then you're going to have as many slides as you want in your appendix. Don't delete slides, just put them down there in your appendix, and you can move them in it or out as appropriate for the situation. So if you do get that meeting, you're going to have more time. You can go more in depth. You can move some of those slides into your core sections, and there your goal is going to be get another meeting. Right. And when you do get further and further into diligence, you'll have more in-depth pitches and more time, and again, move in and out. But I recommend having just one core file that you can then change based on the situation. Another big area before we get into the meat of those 10 sections is how do you handle feedback? Because you are 100% going to get diametrically opposed feedback from different investors that you pitch to. It's normal. And it's because there is no one right way to pitch. Nobody is an authority on pitching. Everyone is flavored by their own experiences, their own opinions. And it's your job as the founder to take all that feedback, let it marinate, sit with it, and decide what feels right to you to incorporate. Or do you notice patterns? Are you getting the same questions, the same feedback over and over again? Then think about incorporating or changing. But if you have a knee-jerk reaction to every piece of feedback that you get, you're going to be pitching someone and they're going to say, oh, you should have done it this way. And you're going to go, oh, I just had it that way and I changed it because someone told me to do that, when I pitched yesterday. And you're going to drive yourself crazy. You are offering an opportunity to join you and help build your company so that they can profit off of what you're doing. You own your pitch, it's yours. So pitch it the way that you want to and take the feedback that feels right to you. You don't have to take every single thing. Okay, last slide here in kind of our intro section, but this is an overarching piece of advice. You'll see this theme throughout the workshop. Clearly state what you do. I see so many founders who have big complex sentences, or they use buzzy words, they make statements they think investors are looking for, but it's so much more effective to just break it down to simple language, say what you do. So these are some examples. All the examples in this deck are real, from real founders. And if we look at the bottom here, if you say look at True Wine on the right, originally they had Duolingo for wine. Well, what if you don't know what Duolingo is? Or what if you don't really know what that comparison means? Then this doesn't tell you anything. There's no information there. When you break it down, just tell me what you do. Fun, accessible wine education for the next generation of wine lovers. Okay, I get that. I have a sense for what we're going to see now in this presentation. So just say what it is you do. All right, again, I love interactive workshops, and I usually do stop a whole bunch, but for the sake of time and the number of participants, we're gonna keep going, and then I'll take some breaks. I'll take a break after this next section. So here, this one, I like to give these kind of top tips before we get into those core 10 sections. So here, we're not talking about like pretty aesthetics, but what are just some of those really basic principles that you should know as you're thinking about what to put on the slide? So this is very similar to what I just talked about. Simple language, break it down. So here, if we look on the left, what originally was written was a comprehensive platform for customer engagement that will revolutionize social media for a unique group. What is that saying? I don't know. I don't think anybody would know. What it turned into is the best way for writers to share their social media posts. So much clearer, so much easier to understand, more impactful. Just state it. This is a great principle for you to keep in mind, just about how human behaviors in our biology and how we react to information when it comes to giving a presentation, particularly in this hybrid world, where some of your presentations are going to be remote, like what I'm doing now, some of them are going to be in person. So when we are in person in the room with somebody else, we naturally feel compelled to meet that person's gaze. We want to make eye contact and reciprocate the eye contact they're giving us. What this means for your presentation is we are going to listen to what you're saying ahead of reading what's on your slides. And it's important because as humans, we cannot both read information, words, and listen to words simultaneously. Think about the last time you were reading a book or trying to read an article and someone was talking to you and it was so frustrating and you were like, oh, please stop talking, I can't read, or you have to put it down. Our brains can't do it. So when you're presenting, you can feel good that someone's going to listen to you as the primary mode because they're matching your gaze or paying attention to you physically in the room. When you are remote, our instinct is to read what's in front of us first and listen second. Because while you can make direct eye contact, I am making direct eye contact by staring in my camera, and you should all train yourselves to do the same thing. We don't feel that compulsion to meet the gaze because we're not physically present. And that means whatever's on your slide, however long it takes somebody to intake that information and get through it, they're not hearing your words. So you want to really have something that's very glanceable, very, as fast as possible, understand what's on there so they can listen to what you're saying. Okay, language, again, use sparse language. You want someone to glance at it and get it quickly. So use bullet points. You don't have to use complete sentences. Just make it as fast as possible for someone to read the words visually. And one of those ways you can do that is by using high contrast colors. So this seems like a simple thing, but I see it all the time. Don't have a shade of color in your background that is very similar to the color you're using for text. It's difficult to read. Just make it high contrast. This here is a great one. Please use header statements in your presentation. Don't do the labels. Don't say problem, solution, right? You don't have to mark those. Header statements can transform your deck. You basically want to follow the rule that one slide should have one major point. If an investor remembered one thing from this slide, what do you want it to be? Because you control the narrative. Write that in the header. It should be able to lead an investor through your presentation, through your storytelling, so that if they only read your headers, which they often do, by the way, they should be able to understand what your pitch is about. A good test of this is copy your headers, put them in a paragraph, and see if you can kind of read it and it makes sense. It's not going to read like you were writing a paragraph, but see if they logically follow one another. And it makes that slide so much faster to understand. Just tell the person what you want them to know there. This is an example. I showed the one on the previous slide. Obviously, a lot of these are from my own presentation, but here you can see a labeled slide where it says our solution. And then the same slide, nothing really changed about the content, but it says our solution is an offline acquisition platform where consumers pay for services with their engagement. I would not have gotten that out of that first slide, and that is a really key part of the presentation. So it just makes it so much easier for someone to understand. Okay, we're into the core 10. Sean, anything that we should cover before we move on?
We haven't had any questions come in through the Q&A, but I did want to say those are some fantastic tips and match what we tend to teach here at MIT. And I wonder if you could speak to the balance of what you put on the slide versus what you're saying, and when you might have the same thing in both, and maybe sometimes you'd have something up that you don't say, or vice versa.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's, if you're going to have a lot of stuff on your slide or a lot of words, that principle of not being able to read and listen at the same time, you want to say what's on the slide for the most part. If you're saying something very different, you're going to mix messages and you're going to lose it. If you have a slide with a good amount of white space, you're using easy to get through chunks of text or boxes. Horizontal display of information is really good because we like to read things that way, and we're faster at it. Then you can add color to what's on the slide, but you should always, again, have 1 point per slide. So if you find yourself saying things that don't support what's on the slide, you should have another slide and you should talk to it there. So it's okay to add that commentary and not say exactly what's on there, but it should be all in the same major point that you're making.
Fantastic. We do have a question that came in that's very appropriate right here. Is you have a separator slide up here. So what about that tactic?
So I don't recommend it when you're doing your fundraising pitch. I do recommend it when you're giving an educational presentation like I'm doing now, or when you have clear sections of content that you're going over. But your pitch is really storytelling when you think about it, and you're leading someone through a narrative. And if you're using those header statements that logically follow one another, you're breaking it up if you put a slide in the middle there, and it actually can disrupt that flow that you have going.
Great, yeah, great question. Let's move on.
All right, great. So now we're into our core 10. There are lots of frameworks out there. I can tell you we spent months and months researching and vetting this with investors to identify the 10 that should please most people and is in a flow that works for most people as well. Not everyone will agree with it. It's not a one size fits all. Yours might be different. So always keep that in mind. No one, including myself, is the end all be all authority of pitching, but this works really well for a lot of people. So first is starting with your mission or your vision. And I really want to encourage people to put their origin story in there. Again, I'm focused on that early pitch. Primarily, I work with pre-seed and seed stage founders. This is geared toward that type of audience. Your pitch is a little different when you move into Series A and beyond. But for pre-seed and seed or anything earlier, investors are looking at you as the steward of their capital, right? It's early on. And they need to know why you made this company. Why did you decide to do this? It's a really big deal. They also know that it's gonna get harder than you think it will. So they need to know that you're in it for more than just potential financial gain, so that when it does get that hard, you're not gonna scare and run away. You're gonna stick with it because you're tied to it in a deeper sense. I see a lot of founders, particularly those who identify as underrepresented, skipping this part and not putting their origin story in. And it's missing. It really is such an effective part of your pitch, and it speaks to your humanity and the humanity of the investor. We're all humans at the end of the day. Our brains all work the same, and we want to feel that from you. So what was it? Do you have a personal connection to the problem that you're solving? Did you experience the problem and you couldn't find a good solution, so you're making your own? Do you have particular technical expertise that allows you to see things in a way that others don't? Talk about why it is you're doing this. Why are you doing what you're doing? And when you're going to talk about that, it's okay to make it personal too. It's actually very impactful to use photos, use imagery that is real life, that is you experiencing the problem or working with your team. I pulled out some examples here of one woman who started a company in the parent tech space. So she's got a picture with her kids. She's a mom. She's founder market fit. And I'm going to move through and not talk about each one of these, but it's okay to use personal imagery and it can be really effective. If you're going to put in a vision statement, think about it more as communicating what is the impact of what you're doing at the end of the day. So I see a lot of founders come through who have these convoluted vision statements full of words that they think investors want to hear, and they need to paint this huge picture of what they're doing. It really doesn't mean very much, and it's tough to get through. So break it down into a sentence like we have here that really helps the investor understand, what is this doing at the end of the day for somebody? This is my favorite slide and one of my best pieces of advice. Seriously, go do this. Yes, this is my grandma. Yes, this is my son. Sure, you can borrow him and talk for hours and hours. That's fine with me. But test out what you say you're doing on people who are not associated with your business. Test it out on a grandparent. Test it out on an elementary school kid. They need to be able to understand what you're saying. It is so helpful. It's one of the best pieces of feedback you can get as a founder and somebody who's pitching. So when you do that, when you say, here's what I do, or here's my mission statement, and really any portion of your deck that you want this type of feedback on, tell it to someone and ask them to tell you back what you said, because they're going to synthesize that information in their own brains and spit it back out to you in a simplified format. If they can't do that, you know that they don't actually understand and you need to rework it. So I don't care how complicated the thing you're working on is, you can talk about it in a way that either of these people could understand what you're doing. And that's what you need to get to in your pitch. Okay, I'm going to move on and talk. Well, actually, Sean, I'll take a little break. And any specific questions about that kind of mission vision statement?
There's nothing that's coming in right now, so maybe move through the problem.
Okay, I'm going to go through the problem and the solution slides, and then I'll take a break after that. So when you're talking about your problem, you really want to make it concrete and quantified if you can. So I pulled out a couple examples here. It doesn't have to be dollars. It can be any kind of values or metrics that helps enforce what you're saying the problem is. And again, there's a whole lot more to talk about in terms of how you phrase your problem section in your pitch, but we're going over just the high points here so we can fit it in the time in the hour. So one that I pulled out is this example of a new food product for children, where the main problem statement was, healthy options in the market right now aren't actually healthy. But it's basically anecdotal, or take my word for it, if you don't include data that shows that. So when you see the nutritional values, that's really eye-opening, right? Like, oh my gosh, I gave my kids those things and I thought they were healthy options. Clearly they're not. It makes the problem tangible. And I took out a slide from one of my own decks here to show how you can use graphics to support your statement and not overwhelm the slide. So I don't recommend stock photography in general. Use graphics if they support what you're saying. Don't take up slide real estate just to put graphics in there. It actually can confuse the, what you're saying and make it takes longer to understand what's on the slide. So here, when you show the people, the audience you're talking about, and you visually show the impact of what's going on, it can be very effective and it helps us digest that information. And they're from credible sources, right? So if you don't believe this, okay, go talk to the Kauffman Foundation. I don't know what to tell you, right? That's an easy way to support what you're saying, and it's not just take my word for it. And again, making your slide just clear and easy. So here in the before example, we can see, the label of problem. There's some, data there at the top as well. There's a generic graphic on there. There's a quote. my eye doesn't know where to go to find the main point of this slide. And I'm not really sure what the big problem is. When you make it easy for someone to understand, you do something like have a clear statement. Life is online and older adults are left behind. People often point out it still says problem. Sure it does. This is her deck. It's not mine. If she wants it in there, that's fine. Personally, I would have gotten rid of the word problem and made the text much bigger on that header statement. And then there's a stat. 75% of users 65 plus do not feel confident on their devices. Instantly get it. And I understand the problem, and I know people who experience that problem, right? It's much easier to understand. So your problem section is what is going to draw somebody in. You have to convince an investor there is a problem. People are experiencing pain in some way, independent from your solution. This exists in the world. And you should take probably 3 slides or so to do that. And the other big thing is by the end of your problem section, you should have defined it in a narrow enough way that you can solve it. You can't have a giant problem that no one company could ever solve. My problem statement can't end at there is a funding gap for women and minorities. I can't solve that on my own. No one company can. So get it to a place where you can solve it, because what's coming up next is your solution. And it should talk about how you directly solve that problem you just defined, that you convinced me people are feeling real pain in some way, or the flip side of that, that there is this huge untapped opportunity that exists out there. Here's what I'm doing that directly addresses what I just talked about. 2 big things that I see a lot in solution sections, and I will warn you to not do. One is use acronyms. Every acronym means something different in a different context. So if you're gonna use an acronym, make sure you define it first. So CRO, I come from med device. Everyone knows it's a contract research organization. Why would anyone call it anything else? Probably not what you think CRO means. Take MD. Are you talking about a doctor, or are you talking about a managing director? Because you're presenting to investors and their natural inclination is to think of managing director. It's who they're around more. So just define what you mean right off the bat if you're going to use an acronym. And then complicated diagrams or charts. Just don't put them in there. Don't use words like deduplication, localization. Don't make me work to understand what you're trying to say. You have a point you're trying to make by showing a diagram like this. So tell me the point. Don't make me try and understand this diagram. Again, later pitches, when you're in due diligence, probably appropriate to get more complicated. First pitch, where your goal is, hey, you should take another meeting with me, it's worth your time, you don't need it. And then the other thing I see missing from so many decks are images of your actual solution. Please don't send a pitch that doesn't show what it is you're building or what you're doing. It can be screenshots, it can be wireframes and mock-ups, it can be you holding your item if it's physical, it can be someone eating the food you're making, whatever you're doing, you can visually show it in your pitch. Because after your solution section, you're really talking about business mechanics from here on out. So if someone doesn't believe that there's a problem that needs solving, or believe that you're building a viable solution, and if they don't understand the solution that you're building, it doesn't really matter the rest of it. And I have to understand what you're doing. A great way to walk somebody through that, to educate the investor on what you're doing, is to pull out a use case and show screenshots or images along the way of how someone would use your solution to solve their problem. Walking somebody through it makes it really clear, but definitely put in there images of what you're doing. Okay, Sean, I'm going to stop here. Any questions about problem or solution section?
So no one is weighing in the Q&A. I'd say, come on, folks. I'm sure if you have even the inkling of a question that somebody else in the audience also has that question and would love to hear it answered. So in thinking about how to present your problems and solutions, or anything else you're curious about at this point, please throw it in there. We have something
We
coming
can
in.
come to it at the end as well. I know typically when you can make it more interactive, someone throws out that first question and then the floodgates open. And so sometimes
Well,
it's-
here's a good mechanics question. What's the feeling on using video to show that customer journey and maybe video in general in a slide deck?
So if you are presenting your slide deck, I stay away from videos or animations or anything that might introduce technical difficulty. You're kind of setting yourself up for maybe the video doesn't work, it takes too long to load, and you can throw yourself off and then you get a little flustered and it can be not great for your presentation. So I stay away from those elements, but certainly send it ahead of time. For sure, if you have a video demonstration and say, hey, it's going to be really helpful if you check this out before we meet, you know, and do it that way. Or if they don't, then send it after. I just wouldn't do it during your pitch, particularly if it's a remote pitch. But something that I have the founders in our program do, and I encourage anyone to do, there's plenty of free tools for this, is film a pitch video. Absolutely. Once you've got your pitch down, film yourself presenting it. Again, we're talking about 5 minutes or less. That's basically the human attention span for watching somebody talk on a video. And then right off the bat, they've already got you're a human. They understand your characteristics and the narrative you provide alongside the content and context of your slide deck. And then when you do meet, it's a much more natural conversation. And you can really talk about the deck instead of having to go through the formality of pitching it and taking that time. So that's a great use of video.
Yeah, that's definitely happening more now, I know, with pitch competitions. One good question, we'll hold one for later, I think you'll get to, but another is, you mentioned that this is tailored for seed and pre-seed. How would the tips and tricks for the presentation change for A and B rounds?
Yeah, so a lot of this still holds true. And in particular, the tips and tricks for presentation style, the 1 point per slide, simplicity of language, all of that holds true. What changes when you get into later stages is there's more importance on the actual business mechanics. And you're going to have sales history, you're going to have financial projections, or just straight financials. Revenue is going to be more important. There's more people on your team, right? It's not so much emphasis on you as the founder and CEO. So different elements become more important, or you're going to include information you wouldn't at the pre-seed or seed stage. But the basic elements of a pitch and how you walk someone through a narrative and what you put on there do remain the same.
And building off of that point about adding more information, maybe we have a question from Max who said they're from HST, so medical device, quite familiar, where the problem can be quite technical. How do you suggest capturing that problem if, for instance, a certain number of patients are suffering from a certain disease, or addressing it from the current treatments have a fundamental challenge to them?
Yeah, I think even if it's complicated or technical, you can always get down to the building blocks of what you're talking about. There's some element there. You can talk about a patient population, and in one slide, you can help me understand how many of them exist, why, what is the pain point that they're feeling? Is it with available medications on the market? Is it the clinical trial process? Is it distribution? You can get to the heart of what it is that's the issue. And think about it. The elevator pitch is named it. It's a real thing because you should be able to tell someone what you do and have them understand without needing 30 slides and half an hour to talk them through it. So, if you got someone really influential in an elevator with you and you have the 5 minutes, what is it you would say to them? I bet you'd say, you wouldn't just sit there and say, I can't explain this in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, let's keep going. We have a couple more, but I'll get them in later.
Yeah, let's keep going. And again, at the end, I'm happy to stick around a little bit longer too and take questions that come in. So now you've convinced me there's a problem. You've explained to me, educated me on what your solution is. How do you make money? Because no matter how mission-based your company is, right? Mine is very mission-based. You're still asking for investment. And it's still an investment evaluation to see, can I profit off of giving you money now? So I have to understand how you plan to make money. So these are just a couple examples. There's all different kinds of ways you can have a business model slide, but really you want to make it clear that you understand who your paying customer is. This could be different than your end user. So in the case, say, of a medical device or a diagnostic company, the people who are going to benefit from what you're doing, the end user, the patients, are probably not your paying customers. So make sure you identify, for me, why your paying customers would buy what you're selling and what it's going to cost them, what your business model is for them. So you can have mixed models. I put these up here because the two examples that have different models of charging, you can have a B2B and a B2C. Just make it clear that you know who's paying you, what are they paying you, or what do you plan to charge. It's also totally fine to say, we're early stage and we're figuring it out, and here's our monetization opportunities. I'm often asked, should you include your financial projections? This is a little bit of a tricky area. So only 35% of pitch decks at the early stage do include them. So you're certainly not in the minority if you don't have them. It's more common not to. And reasons not to include your financial projections are, one, investors tend to stick on them if you have them. They will pick it apart. They'll really linger on it. And you don't need them to buy into your financial projections to convince them to have another meeting. If you want them to really understand what you're doing, your vision, get excited about wanting to learn more, you can have your projections at the next meeting. But particularly when you're early stage, if you're pre-revenue, you don't need them for the purpose, for the goal of that first pitch. And then they also can contain sensitive information that maybe you don't want everybody knowing. Maybe it's a little bit deeper into your business than you're comfortable with just anybody knowing, because no investor is going to sign an NDA before your first pitch. And you don't know who they know. You don't know where this might lead. Even if you're not sending them your deck and you're just presenting, you can take screenshots. You don't know what people are doing. So oftentimes your finances are something that you just don't want in that first context. Okay, I'm going to go through market size and then I'll stop, because I know these two sections that deal with the money element can be challenging and there's often a lot of questions there. So your market size, I like the flow of having it follow your business model, because if you do a bottom-up approach, which I'll talk through and I highly recommend, it's based on your pricing structure. It's based on your own business model. So you need to have that context before you go into the market size so we understand the numbers behind it. So when you do go into market size, it's really important because it tells an investor how much opportunity exists. There's some math behind it. They need to know that there is a big enough market for what you're selling that it could support you and a competitor, and they can get the return that they're looking for out of this investment, which is different. That's a whole other workshop and conversation about angels versus family offices versus institutional funds, what they're looking for in terms of the multiple return, but they have to know that the potential is there for it. So there are two basic ways to do a market size. You can do a top down, which is where you say, my market is X billions of dollars, and if I get 1% of it, it's this much opportunity. This is not a specific approach to your business. It can be good to have that context to show industry trends, but there's a lot in there that has nothing to do with what you're selling. So it's less credible to investors. It just isn't specific to your particular business and opportunity. A bottom up is how investors like to see your market sizing done. It's much more credible because it's based on your business, what you can sell, your pricing model. It's a much better indicator of the actual opportunity for the investment that you're asking for. And so this is where you hear TAM, SAM, and SOM. So your TAM is your total addressable market. It's saying if 100% of my potential customers bought what I'm selling, this is that total opportunity. So it's not saying I will get all of this market share. It's saying this exists in the world. And that's the math behind it, right? You're saying, here are all the possible customers who would buy what I'm selling or could buy what I'm selling, times the average annual revenue from one customer equals, here's my total potential market. And it should be your vision. It should be forward looking for your company. Your SAM is you're giving it a little haircut and you're saying, well, within that TAM, there are some people that I'm just realistically not going to reach. They're realistically not going to buy what I'm selling. So here's my serviceable addressable market. And then your SOM is your serviceable obtainable market. So here you can either do another haircut and you can say, I think this is short-term looking. So in the next 1 to 2 years, here's the market I'm going after. Or you can do it a little bit of another bottom up where it's based on your go-to-market strategy. And you can say in the next 1 to 2 years, I'm focusing on these regions or these customer segments. And if I look at that, the number of customers in those segments or regions times my anticipated revenue from them, that's my SOM. So all of these should be dollar values. I've got an example here. This is a fictional example. This is an approach that I really like. In our program, we actually have a whole template, a workbook to walk through, that you can use for this, because I really like this approach, where first you're going to identify your potential customer segments. This is a thing you should be able to do. How do you segment your customers? And it can be a mix. It can be B2B, B2C, doesn't matter. You can have 2, you can have 50. However you're operating your business, but they should be mutually exclusive customer segments. So in this fictional B2B SaaS example, their customer segments are small, medium, and large companies. Then you're going to do a little bit of research and you're going to find out, to your best estimate, how many of those customers exist in each segment. If you're in the US, it's very typical to use US numbers only, and a rule of thumb that's widely accepted for global numbers is to multiply the US by 3. So I would just do that, unless you have a very country specific approach. You'll have those 2 columns. Then you're going to say, okay, for each of those segments, what is my anticipated annual revenue for someone in that segment? And this is why it's okay to have different business models, because you're doing it for each customer segment. When you multiply those 2 numbers, there's your TAM. And what's great about doing it in this table is you get your TAM for every segment. So even if you're not putting this in your pitch, it's a great exercise to do just as the business owner, to understand what is your customer landscape. If I change my pricing model a little, what does that do for my market size? Do I have certain customer segments that are way bigger opportunities than other ones? Maybe that informs your go-to-market strategy. And then you fill out the other columns. If you're doing a % haircut for serviceable or obtainable, here I have another % haircut, but you could do it in a more specific kind of its own bottom-up method. Last slide here, Sean, and then we'll stop for a second, but I'll leave this up on the screen while we take questions. Just some good sources for data. How do you find this information? Obviously, government data is great. You're looking for a credible source. The one that's really underutilized that I recommend is looking at industry incumbents. They often will have their investor presentations, and if they're a public company, they have to, up on their website. And in those presentations, they have market research that they have paid for, and it's really good data. Take it. You can use it. Go download their investor presentations. I have gotten so much great data this way, and I think it's really underutilized. Okay, so I know we've only got about 15 minutes left. I still have a lot of content, so maybe like 2 questions, Sean.
Sounds great. I will bundle actually the top voted question with another one. Question is, what about including market size as an element of the problem and upfront, and not holding it back, because sometimes your problem might involve scale as well, and that might mean people impacted as well as the market. And connected with that a little bit, as you're going through these, how do you handle investors who might stop you or push back on the problem or solution, and maybe disagree with you or badger you about those things?
All those badgering investors. So for the first question, that's where that's more of a top down. If you're going to include it as context in your problem and you're saying you're sizing the number of people feeling the pain point that you're addressing, great, definitely include that in your problem. That's a quantification of the problem, but you're not bringing in your business model yet, right? That's for later. So when we're doing the market size, you're looking at dollar value market size, which isn't the problem, right? Or you don't want to lead off your pitch that way. Like, we could make this much money, right? So it's absolutely good. Include the number of people or the scale of the problem or some contextual industry trends or something as part of your problem for sure. But that's different than your bottom-up market size. For the second question, that's such a big question. And, you know, this is where taking feedback is important. So if you give a few pitches and you get the same kind of pushback or the same kind of skepticism, that's telling to you, right? Think about who was giving you that feedback. Was it a certain type of investor? Are they all in the same space, all same kind of demographic or profile? Go pitch to someone who's not and see if you get that same feedback or same pushback. If you have one particularly antagonistic type of pitch where you're getting a lot of that, look at, go do more. You need more data before you become disheartened or think, oh my gosh, am I really doing this right? Or is this a problem? Don't look at things in a vacuum. That's my best advice there.
Definitely. You might be just in front of the wrong people, and it's all about fit as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's jump on. I think there's a couple more questions about sort of finances and competition. This is great.
Yep, great. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna push on. I'm gonna go a little quick, so I'm worried people might have a hard stop. So competition here. Oftentimes you see the 2x2 matrix. I don't love the 2x2. Neither do most of the investors now. In the hundreds that I've talked to is when I fundraised before and as part of Scroobius, because you are always up and to the right. And it's very subjective how you define your axes. So the investor has to first understand, how did you define your axes? Do I agree with those definitions? And then do I understand why all these other companies are on here? And you're just always up and to the right. More specific to your company and more compelling is to do this kind of table where you put yourself in the first column and then you're going to say, okay, what are my 3 to 5 closest competitors? So if one of my customers was evaluating what to do to solve their problem, what is in their choice set? So it's a more narrowly defined and more specific landscape that you're looking at. And a competitor could be another company, or it could be a status quo way of doing things, right? Think about that customer's choice set, because sometimes it's a behavior change, not another company that you're up against. And then in the rows, you're going to put the benefits or the value adds that you provide to your customers. What are their decision points? What is really important to them and would compel them to pick one of these choices to solve their problem? It's okay if it's a little bit longer. It doesn't have to be like 3 words, as long as you're clearly communicating, right? So don't just say affordable. Like, what does that mean? And then you're going to fill in the chart, checks and X's, right? There should be a mix, but this visually lets you see where is that white space that you identified in customer needs, and how do you fill it where others aren't, and what are they filling? So it's a really great way to look at your competitive landscape. This section, why now? This is not in every framework, but I can tell you it is so important for investors. Why now can either or both be macro factors, what's going on in the world, or micro in terms of your own traction, or maybe you brought in a key team member. Why is now the right time for you to exist? And why is now the right time for you to be fundraising? If you're going to bring up the pandemic and COVID, totally relevant, of course, it's fine, but you want to talk about how you are accelerated by it and not defined by it. So I use this example of a woman who started a company that can do remote eye exams. hugely accelerated by COVID, right? She started it right at the height of, or before, but it was, fundraising at the height of it, but not defined by it. This is going to be something that exists post-COVID. When you're talking micro, so internal to your company, a good way is to use quotes from important stakeholders or customers that talk about why they think now is the right time for what you're doing and how you solve a problem for them. And then another really great one, I highly recommend including a timeline so that you put things in a temporal sense as well. So when the company started, the milestones that you've achieved along the way, and how your funding fits into those different milestones. And you can be a little forward looking here too, but it really helps to see that chronology of the life cycle of the company. All right, I'm going to keep going through a little bit. I promise I will stop for some more questions, but I like to make these as content heavy as I can so you guys get as much value out of this as possible. So go-to-market strategy, this can mean different things to different people. Really, for an investor, it means how are you going to acquire your customers? Do you know who they are, how you reach them, how you're going to convert them? So an approachable framework that I like for this is to think of the now, the next, and the later. So now, your early stage, you're trying to be really capital conscious. How are you going to find your early adopters and your champions? What do they look like? Where are they hanging out? How do you reach them? And what are your quick and cheap ways to get them on board with you? What are you doing right now for that? And then if we think about next, how do you move beyond your early adopters? What channels are you going to use? These have really different implications for your operating expenses. So, do you need to build up an internal sales force? Are you doing B2B sales and key account management? That's very different than most of my users are in these specific social media channels, and I can use paid marketing and organic or influencers or, whatever your choice is. They are very different expenditure implications and capital needs. And then later, what does exponential growth look like? What do you do there? Be as specific as you can, not down to the detail of how you're spending money on everything, but don't just say SEO or influencers on their own. Don't put generic terms in there that anyone can do. Say, well, what specifically, how are you using those to reach the customer that you're trying to reach? Okay, your team, you know what, I'm just going to go. So we've got the team, and then I've only got a couple other slides after that. I think, Sean, I'm just going to get through the end of the content, and then we can fit as many questions in as we can. So your team slide, really you're showing that you have founder market fit, that you understand you're at the early stage, you get the mindset of your customers, you have a fit with the market that you're going after. Here, I put in my own slide here, the blurry people are investors, not advisors, but I like showing this because it can be really effective to put advisors on your team slide at the early stage, particularly if you're a solo founder or you have a small team, but you want to list what they are advising you on, that they are hands-on and that they are helping you execute. And they're basically filling the role that a management team would before you're able to hire people full-time. So that's how you use it. And it can be a good point of validation for early stage investors too. They might know these people or be able to back channel to them, have them in your network. So it can be helpful to list them out that way. Thank you slide at the end. Put stuff on it. It often lingers up there and people just have like a big thank you. Put all your contact information, all your social handles, put ways they can interact with you beyond just fundraising. Make use of your thank you slide. If it's going to get sent around, have stuff on there. Use that real estate. Okay, this is my last slide, and then we'll do as many questions as we can. But optional content. So this is stuff that I didn't put in the core 10, but they are things that you might want to include depending on the context of your pitch. The first one, your financial projections. We spoke to these a little bit. If you're going to include them, make sure they're believable, they're reasonable. Don't make a hockey stick just for the sake of making a hockey stick, because if things do progress in your conversation, you're going to have to answer questions about it. So most important is to explain your assumptions behind your projection model, What is driving that model? What are the important levers? And speak to it in a way that the meaning behind the numbers that you've put in there. Your raise, the ask. It is really important to know that if you are not sending it to a known accredited investor or organization otherwise regulated to make investments, you are soliciting the general public, and you cannot do that. And the SEC cares. That's why I don't have it in my Core 10. If you're sending it to a known accredited investor or institution, yes, put it in there. If you're not, if it's on a public platform or you're just sending it around, don't put your ask in there. It can get you in trouble now, but it can get you in trouble later too when you do get to institutional money if you've been found to violate general solicitation regulations earlier. If you're going to have the ask slide on there, put in the amount, the financing vehicle. Is it a note? Is it a safe? Is it a price round? Any relevant terms that go along with that. But also include the milestones that this round is going to achieve for you. Not just your use of funds. Yes, you should have that, but also where does it set you up? What is the next step? Are you going to go raise a later round? Are you going to be profitable? Are you going to IPO, hopefully, whatever the stage of your company is, but list how this positions you to be able to do the next thing. And then exit strategy. Some investors care, most don't at the very early stage. It's just too early. This is a little bit of know your audience, know your investor if it's important to them. It might influence decisions you would make in the operations of the company. So for instance, if you are in a biotech space and the goal is to become acquired, right? Your whole strategy is that's what you're going to do, then maybe include it and talk about where you think the targets there are, how it would influence what you're doing. Otherwise, it's probably early. You really don't need to spend too much time on that. Okay, Sean, I've gotten through the content. I've put up the link here again if anybody wants to learn more. We have a ton more content on our site as well. But let's answer questions.
Yeah, so maybe two 30-second questions here. So one that's been up for a long time and I know is sensitive for founders. How do you protect IP in the pitch?
Yeah, so I get asked this question a lot, and I don't want other people to know what I'm doing. They're going to copy it, or how do I? Most people are not looking to take your idea. There is so much in the execution of your idea. That's what matters. My opinion, you should be shouting what you do to anyone who wants to listen. Talk about what you're doing. If you have very sensitive IP and you are worried about someone stealing it, you're probably looking at a very specific kind of investor who would be interested in that. And maybe that's a different situation. If you've got a patent, you've got a patent, you're protected. But this whole stealth mode, worrying all the time, people are not out there looking to take your idea. And even if they did, they're not going to execute it in the same way that you are going to. And that's really what distinguishes you.
Yeah. And so to go along with that, maybe a couple questions about if you have future markets or more applications that you would move to later, what's the best way to present that beyond your immediate plan?
Yeah, so you definitely want to talk about forward-looking and the vision and overall goal for your company, that what you're doing now is not representative of the full scope of what you could do. And your market sizing should be in that forward-looking way as well. What is the market for what your company is going to do, not what you can do today with limited resources. And that should be part of your solution section, right? You're talking about what your solution to this problem is. I don't think you have built all of your solution now. So you should be talking about what you plan to build to be the solution. And that's why you're fundraising, right? Because you need capital to be able to fulfill that vision solution that you're talking about. Exactly.
So thank you so much. That's hopefully super helpful for our audience. I'm going to toss it back over to Katya to close. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic. That's all the time that we have for today. Allison, thanks so much for sharing all the different tips and methods and actionable strategies today. On behalf of the MIT Alumni Association, we're so grateful and appreciate you being with us to share your insights and advice with all of our alumni from around the globe. So as a reminder, today's webinar will be on the MIT Alumni Association's YouTube channel under the Careers playlist in about a week from today. If you're interested in similar programming, we are dropping a link in the chat for the MIT Social Entrepreneurship Alumni Group that regularly offers content like this. Finally, be sure to register for next Wednesday's MIT Alumni Forum, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. No, I'll be there, and a link to RSVP is also in the chat. So thank you all for joining here today, and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.